There are moments in life when you realize that everything you've worked for, everything you've sacrificed, can be taken away in an instant. I spent my entire life saving for the future, planning for a peaceful retirement where I could finally rest after decades of hard work. I thought I was doing everything right, that my sacrifices would protect me and my family. But I couldn't have been more wrong. It was the person I trusted the most who destroyed everything I had built. My own son. Alex came to me with his dream of starting a business, his eyes filled with hope and ambition. He convinced me that this was his chance to make something great, that my savings would help him turn that dream into reality. Without a second thought, I handed him a large portion of my retirement savings. But what I didn't know was that his dream was nothing more than a facade. Months later, I discovered the truth. My son hadn't used the money to build his business. Instead, he spent it on his own selfish desires, living a life of luxury while my future crumbled. When I confronted him, he didn't apologize. He didn't express any regret. Instead, he demanded more. And in that moment, I realized that it wasn't just about the money. It was about respect, trust, and the painful truth that sometimes the people you love can hurt you in ways you never saw coming. But that was the turning point. That was when I decided to take control of my life again. And what happened next would change everything for both of us. I had always been a simple man. I didn't need much to feel fulfilled. My life was built around hard work, honesty, and the hope that one day my efforts would be rewarded. Raised in a small town, I understood the value of sweat and sacrifice. I wasn't the kind of person who looked for handouts or shortcuts. My father had taught me that the only way to truly succeed in life was to put in the time and effort, no matter how long it took. I spent my youth working odd jobs, trying to make ends meet while also attending school. My dreams were modest, but they were mine. I didn't aspire to be rich or famous. I just wanted a life where I could be proud of what I had built, a life where I could provide for my family and enjoy the peace of knowing I'd worked hard for everything I had. After I graduated, I found work in construction. It wasn't glamorous, but paid the bills. Day after day, I would wake up before dawn, drive to the job site, and spend hours working with my hands. My back was always sore, my hands rough, but I never complained. I didn't need praise or recognition. The work itself gave me a sense of pride that nothing else could. But it wasn't just about work. I was building something for my family. I married young, met Mary at a local diner, and we fell in love almost immediately. She had a quiet strength that I admired, and we knew early on that we were meant to build a life together. We didn't have much when we started out, but we had each other. We worked hard to save, to get by, and to build a foundation for our future. The years went by quickly. Before I knew it, we had son Alex. From the moment he was born, everything changed. He became the center of our world. Mary and I poured everything we had into raising him. We worked harder, saved more, and made sure Alex had opportunities we never had. We wanted him to have a better life, to grow up without the struggles we faced. We pushed him to dream big, to aim high. We wanted him to be anything he wanted to be. When Alex was little, he looked up to me with admiration. He wanted to be just like his old man, working hard, being strong, and taking care of his family. I was proud of that. I thought, as any father would, that I was giving him the right example. But as Alex grew older, things began to change. He no longer looked at me with the same admiration. He became distant, and I couldn't understand why. I watched him drift away, consumed by his own desires, his own dreams. When he was in his late teens, Alex came to me with a plan. He had an idea for a business, something he was passionate about. He was determined to make it work. I could see the excitement in his eyes, the same look I had once had when I first started working. He told me he just needed some financial help to get started, that with my support, he could turn this idea into a reality. I wanted to believe in him. I wanted to be the father who helped his son succeed. So, I made a decision. Mary and I had been saving for our retirement for years. It wasn't much, but it was enough for us to live comfortably when the time came. It was the money we had worked so hard for, every penny earned from decades of labor. But when Alex came to me, I hesitated for only a moment. I couldn't say no to my son. I handed him the money, everything I had saved for our future. I believed in him. I thought he would use it wisely. I thought he would appreciate the sacrifice we had made. But as the months passed, I began to notice that things weren't adding up. Alex's business wasn't growing the way he had promised. There were no updates, no progress reports, just excuses. And then, one day, I found out the truth. My heart sank. Alex hadn't used the money for his business. Instead, he had spent it on himself, on clothes, on vacations, on everything but what he had promised. He had taken my life, savings, and squandered it on his own pleasures. I was devastated. The pain was unlike anything I had ever felt before. I had given him everything I had, and in return, he had betrayed my trust. I had worked my entire life for that money, and he had thrown it away without a second thought. But it wasn't just the money. It was the way he had treated me, the way he had disrespected everything I had worked for. I felt like I had failed, like I had been blind to the reality of who my son had become. But I wasn't going to let this break me. I was going to do something about it. I didn't confront Alex immediately. Instead, I took a step back and thought about what I needed to do. I realized that I had to regain control of my life, to take back the power I had given away. So I made a choice. I sold everything I had, our house, the property I had worked so hard to buy, and moved into a smaller home. I didn't need all that space, all that stuff. What I needed was to find myself again, to rebuild what had been broken. The days after I discovered what Alex had done felt like an endless fog. I couldn't escape the overwhelming sense of betrayal that hung over me. I had spent so many years working to build a life for my family, and in the blink of an eye, my own son had turned my world upside down. The house I had worked so hard for, the retirement I had been saving for, gone just like that. What hurt the most wasn't the money. It wasn't the life savings that I had handed over to Alex in good faith. It was the realization that the person I trusted the most, the one I had believed in, had lied to me. At first, I didn't know how to process it. I spent the first few nights sitting in my chair, staring at the walls, wondering where I had gone wrong. Had I raised him poorly? Had I done something to make him think this was okay? I had worked my entire life with the belief that family came first, that love and respect were the foundations of everything. But now, it seemed like Alex didn't care about any of that. All he cared about was his own desires, his own dreams, and he had used me to fuel them. I tried talking to him. I tried to make him understand the depth of what he had done. But every time I confronted him, he brushed me off. He was defensive, angry, and completely dismissive of the hurt he had caused. He didn't see what he had done as a betrayal. In his mind, I was just another obstacle standing in the way of his success. He couldn't understand why I was so upset. He couldn't see beyond his own self-interest. It became clear to me that Alex didn't appreciate the sacrifices I had made. He didn't understand what it took for me to save that money, to work long hours day in and day out, to sacrifice my own needs for the future of our family. He hadn't learned the value of hard work, of responsibility, of taking ownership of your decisions. Instead, he had chosen to treat me like a mere source of funds, something he could tap into whenever it suited him. When Alex came to me again, asking for more money, that was the breaking point. I was done. I had spent my entire life giving, supporting, and sacrificing for him. And now, he was asking me for more. More of what? More of my hard-earned savings? More of my trust? More of my respect? It was too much. I had given him everything I had, and he had taken it without a second thought. I told him no. I told him I couldn't help him anymore. It wasn't just the money. It was everything. The trust was gone. The respect was gone. What we had once had was broken beyond repair. And for the first time in a long time, I realized something important. I didn't need to keep giving. I didn't need to keep enabling his behavior. I had spent so much time focusing on him, on making sure he had everything he needed, that I had forgotten about myself. When I said no to him, it wasn't just about the money. It was about reclaiming my own life. It was about regaining control. It was about showing Alex that respect, love, and trust are earned, not given freely. It wasn't an easy decision. My heart ached as I looked at my son, who seemed so lost, so desperate. But I knew deep down that this was the only way he would learn. He had to face the consequences of his actions, and I had to stop being the one to shield him from them. Alex didn't take it well. He was furious. He yelled at me, calling me heartless, accusing me of abandoning him. He couldn't understand why I wasn't there to bail him out, to fix everything for him like I always had before. He begged me to change my mind, to help him one more time. But I stood firm. I had made my decision. This time, I wasn't going to give in. In the days that followed, things only got worse. Alex cut me out of his life completely. He stopped answering my calls, refused to speak to me when I tried to reach out. It was as if he couldn't bear to face the reality of what he had done. He couldn't bear to accept that the life he had been living, relying on me, relying on my sacrifices, was over. But the more he pulled away, the more I realized that this was exactly what needed to happen. He had to grow up. He had to learn to take responsibility for his actions. And he had to do it without my help. I wasn't the only one who was struggling. Mary, my wife, was devastated. She didn't know how to fix things. She had always been the bridge between Alex and me, the one who tried to keep the peace, but even she couldn't understand what had happened. She couldn't understand how our son had gone from being the boy who admired me to the man who had betrayed me. We both felt helpless, like we were losing him for good. But as the days turned into weeks, I began to feel something that I hadn't felt in a long time: strength. I was angry, yes, but more than that, I was determined. I wasn't going to let Alex's mistakes define me. I wasn't going to let his actions destroy everything I had worked for. I had worked too hard, sacrificed too much, and now it was time for me to take back control. It was time to rebuild my life, piece by piece, and show Alex that there was more to life than just chasing dreams at the expense of those who love you. The days after I cut ties with Alex were the longest of my life. Every night, I would lie awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying the moment I had refused to help him. I had hoped that by saying no, I would be giving him the tough love he needed. But the more I thought about it, the more I began to doubt myself. Was this the right decision? Could I have handled it differently? Every argument, every demand, every angry word he had thrown at me kept echoing in my mind. And with each passing day, the weight of the situation became heavier. I remember the first time I saw Alex after I had refused to give him any more money. It was a few weeks later when I ran into him at the grocery store. He barely acknowledged me at first. His eyes, once full of admiration, were now filled with coldness, almost like he was looking at a stranger. He turned his back to me, pretending I wasn't there, as if I was the one who had betrayed him. The anger that simmered inside me in that moment was almost overwhelming. I'd spent my whole life working, giving, supporting, and now, here he was treating me like I was the one who had let him down. The reality of what I had done began to set in. I had created a rift between us, one that seemed impossible to bridge. I couldn't stop thinking about how my son, the one I had raised and loved with all my heart, had come to see me as an obstacle. How did things get so bad? When did he stop seeing me as his father and start seeing me as nothing more than a source of financial support? I had always thought that the bond between a father and son was unbreakable. But now I wasn't so sure. This wasn't just about the money. This was about something much deeper. Alex had crossed a line, and I had crossed one too. I had allowed him to take advantage of my love and trust. I had let him believe that I would always be there to rescue him, no matter what. And now, I was paying the price. The days turned into weeks, and the silence between us became deafening. I tried to reach out to him, sent texts, left messages, and even wrote him a letter explaining why I had done what I did. But every attempt to break the silence was met with nothing but resistance. He refused to listen. He refused to even acknowledge my attempts to reach him. It was as if I didn't exist in his world anymore. And as much as it hurt, part of me knew that this was what needed to happen. I had to let him go. The hardest part of all of this was that I didn't know if Alex would ever understand. Would he ever realize the gravity of his actions? Would he ever recognize the pain he had caused? Or would he continue down this path of selfishness, blaming everyone but himself? I couldn't say for sure. All I knew was that I couldn't keep enabling him. If I continued to give in to his demands, I would only be reinforcing his belief that he didn't have to take responsibility for anything. Meanwhile, life around me continued. Mary and I tried to keep the peace, but it wasn't easy. She was heartbroken, too. She didn't understand why Alex had become this way. She blamed herself, wondering if there was something we had done wrong. But deep down, I knew that this wasn't about us. This was about Alex and his choices. We had given him everything: love, guidance, support. And yet, he had chosen to betray us. I kept thinking back to the days when Alex was a little boy. He used to sit on my lap, asking me questions about life, about work, about everything. I used to tell him that hard work would always pay off, that honesty and integrity were the cornerstones of a good life. I told him that if he stayed true to his values, he would never have to worry about the future. But somewhere along the way, those lessons had fallen on deaf ears. Somewhere along the way, Alex had stopped listening. The more I thought about it, the more I realized that this was no longer just about me and Alex. It was about something bigger: the values I'd tried to instill in him, the lessons I had hoped he would carry forward. The foundation of trust that had once held our family together had cracked, and now it was up to Alex to rebuild it, if he could. It wasn't just about the money. It was about respect. It was about the bond we shared, the trust we had built over the years. But now all of that was gone, and as much as it hurt, I couldn't fix it for him. He had to learn that on his own. I spent the following weeks trying to focus on myself, on rebuilding my life without Alex in it. I didn't know how long it would take, or if it would ever happen, but I knew one thing: I had to put myself first. I had given so much of myself to Alex for so many years that I had forgotten what it meant to care for my own well-being. It was time for me to regain control of my life, to stop living in the shadow of my son's mistakes. But the pain of not knowing whether Alex would ever come around lingered. Every day, I woke up wondering if today would be the day he would reach out, if today would be the day he would apologize, or if today would be just another day of silence. The uncertainty was unbearable, but it was a part of the process. I had to be patient, not just with him, but with myself. This was a lesson we both needed to learn, the hard way. As the days turned into weeks, I began to notice subtle changes in myself. The anger I had felt towards Alex was still there, but it was evolving into something else: a deep, aching sorrow. It wasn't just the betrayal that hurt anymore. It was the realization that the life I had imagined for my son, the future I had worked so hard to provide, was slipping through my fingers. I had done everything right, or at least I thought I had. I had given him everything, trusted him with my hard-earned savings, and supported him at every turn. But in the end, I had failed him. And perhaps more devastatingly, I had failed myself. The nights were the hardest. I would lie awake, unable to sleep, my mind spinning with thoughts of Alex. I wondered where he was, what he was doing, if he even thought about me. Did he miss me? Did he regret his actions? Or was he too proud to admit he had made a mistake? These questions gnawed at me, leaving me restless. The house that had once felt so full of life now felt empty, hollow. I would walk through the rooms, seeing remnants of his presence: his old jacket hanging in the closet, his school trophies collecting dust on a shelf, and it would all come rushing back. Mary tried to comfort me, but even she seemed distant. She didn't know how to bridge the gap between Alex and me, and I couldn't blame her. She was torn in her own way, devastated by what had happened, but also heartbroken over the loss of the family dynamic we had once cherished. We used to talk about what we'd do when we were older, when the house was quiet and the kids had their own lives. But now, the future felt uncertain. Everything had changed, and it felt like I had no control over any of it. I started throwing myself into work again, trying to fill the void that Alex's absence had created. The hours were long, but they gave me something to focus on. For a while it worked. I could lose myself in the routine of the job, the physicality of it. But even when I was busy, my thoughts kept returning to Alex. I would catch myself wondering if he was sitting in a bar somewhere, drinking away the consequences of his actions, or if he was still trying to convince people that his business was a dream worth chasing. It was like he was living in a fantasy, one that I had been a part of, but now I was nothing more than a casualty of it. I remember the first time I saw him again after our falling out. It wasn't planned, and it wasn't a friendly encounter. I was at the local hardware store, picking up some supplies for a project I had started around the house, when I saw him across the aisle. He didn't notice me at first, and part of me wanted to turn around and walk away, to pretend I hadn't seen him. But there was something inside me that knew I couldn't avoid this moment. It had been weeks since we had spoken, weeks since I'd seen him, and now here he was standing in front of me like a ghost from my past. When he finally noticed me, his expression shifted. It wasn't anger, but it wasn't warmth either. It was something cold, distant, a look that told me everything I needed to know. He wasn't ready to face me, to face the consequences of his actions. I could see it in his eyes. He had built a wall around himself, and nothing, not even the father who had loved him unconditionally, could break through it. I stood there, frozen for what felt like an eternity, before I said anything. "Alex," I finally managed, my voice strained, unsure of what I was even going to say. He didn't respond at first. He just stood there, looking at me, almost like he was waiting for me to say something more, something that would somehow make everything okay. But I had nothing left to say. There was nothing left to fix. He shifted his weight, looking uncomfortable. "I didn't expect to see you here," he muttered, as if making small talk could erase everything that had happened. I wanted to shout at him, to tell him how much pain he had caused, to tell him how much I had hurt. But instead, I swallowed the words and nodded slowly. "Well, I'm here," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. And just like that, he turned and walked away. There was no apology, no acknowledgement of the hurt he had caused. Just a quick, cold exit. And in that moment, I realized something that hit me harder than any betrayal could. Alex was gone, not just physically, but emotionally. He had already checked out of our relationship, and no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't bring him back. The days after that encounter were the darkest I had ever experienced. The grief I had felt earlier intensified, and it felt like a weight pressing down on my chest. I began to question everything, my choices, my relationship with Alex, my role as a father. What had I done wrong? Had I given him too much? Had I been too lenient, too trusting? Was this the price I paid for trying to do right by him? I didn't know the answers, and the not knowing was the hardest part. As the weeks passed, I withdrew even more. I stopped reaching out to Alex, stopped trying to fix things. It wasn't because I didn't care. It was because I knew that I couldn't fix it for him anymore. He had to fix himself. He had to take responsibility for the mess he had made. And for the first time in a long time, I realized something that gave me a strange sense of peace. I had done my part. The rest was up to him. It had been nearly a month since I last saw Alex, and the silence between us had become unbearable. There were days when I would catch myself waiting for his call, for some sign that he might be ready to talk, to apologize. But as time dragged on, I began to accept that this might be the way things were now, that this chasm between us would never be bridged. I had given everything I could, and now, it seemed, I had to accept the fact that Alex might never come back into my life the way he once was. But just when I thought I had come to terms with it, something unexpected happened. I was sitting in my new small house one evening, watching the news and nursing a drink in the quiet, empty space that had become my refuge. The stillness had become a part of me, a companion in the absence of the life I had once known. I had grown accustomed to it, but the loneliness still crept in when I least expected it. Then the phone rang. I looked at the screen, half expecting it to be a telemarketer or some automated call. But when I saw Alex's name flash across the display, my heart skipped a beat. For a moment, I froze. The phone vibrated in my hand, but I couldn't bring myself to answer. I wasn't sure I was ready for this conversation. Part of me wanted to pick up the phone and demand answers, demand that he explain why he had done what he did. But another part of me, the part that had been slowly healing, knew that I couldn't go down that road again. Finally, I pressed the button to accept the call. I wasn't sure what I expected, but I certainly wasn't prepared for what came next. "Dad." Alex's voice sounded almost fragile. I wasn't used to hearing him sound like that. It was a voice I hadn't heard in years, one that didn't have an edge, didn't carry the arrogance that had defined his tone for so long. "I need to talk to you." My heart pounded in my chest, and I could feel my breath catch in my throat. For a moment, I didn't say anything. I wasn't sure what to say. But then, something shifted inside me. I didn't need him to apologize. I didn't need him to beg for my forgiveness. What I needed was to know that he had finally seen the truth. Go ahead, I said, keeping my voice steady. I'm listening. The silence on the other end of the line seemed to stretch on forever. I could hear him breathing, almost as if he were gathering the courage to speak. I waited, trying not to rush him. This wasn't about me anymore. This was about him, and whether or not he was ready to face what he had done. Finally, he spoke again. I know I messed up. I didn't realize what I had until it was too late. I thought you owed me something, that you would always be there to fix things for me. I thought I could just take without understanding the cost. But I was wrong. I see that now. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. This was the moment I had been waiting for, the moment I had longed for, but also feared. Was this real? Was my son finally taking responsibility for his actions? Or was this just another attempt to manipulate me, to get me to forgive him without any real change? I've been thinking a lot, he continued, his voice trembling slightly. About everything. About you, about Mom, about what I've done. And I realize that I've hurt you both more than I can ever explain. I've been a coward. I don't know if I can ever make up for what I've done, but I want to try. I don't want to be the person I've been anymore. I don't know how to fix things, but I want to start somewhere. The words hung in the air, suspended between us. I didn't know what to say. The hurt was still there, but so was the hope. I had waited for this moment for so long, this acknowledgement, this confession. But now that it was here, I felt unsure of what I should do. Was it enough? Could I really believe in this change? Or was this just another one of his promises that would eventually be broken?